Hi, I'm DuEwa Frazier, and you're listening to episode 53 of Nerdacity Podcast. Today, my guest is Nzadi Keita. She is a poet, an essayist, a scholar, and a teacher, a professor of creative writing, American literature, and Africana studies at Ursinus College. She served as an advisor to the award-winning documentary Bad, Sonia Sanchez, and has consulted with the Geraldine R. Dodge Poetry Foundation and Mural Arts Philadelphia. Her latest collection, which we will discuss today, is Migration Letters. Her last book of poetry is Brief Evidence of Heaven, a finalist for the Phyllis Wheatley Poetry Prize, and sheds light on Anna Murray Douglas, Frederick Douglass's first wife, and is cited by David Blight in his prize-winning biography, Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom. Keita's work has been published in the anthology A Face to Meet the Faces, a persona poetry anthology, and is in journals such as Killen's Review of Arts and Letters, Poet Lore, Crab Orchard. Her prose will appear in the forthcoming When We Exhale, Reflections on Rest, Grief, and Intimacy from Black Freighter Press. I hope you enjoy this episode. Greetings, Nzadi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on Nerdacity Podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
And so excited to celebrate National Poetry Month with you.
Yes, I know.
Yes, indeed. And I'd like to congratulate you on your new book, Migration Letters. It is quite a beautiful book.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Nzadi, we will talk more about your new collection. But first, I really want to find out more about your writing life and a lot of the many achievements you've had. As I review your biography, I'm just really struck by so much of the wonderful work you've done, from serving as an advisor on the award-winning documentary Bad, Sonia Sanchez, and by also being a consultant for Geraldine R. Dodge Poetry Foundation and Mural Arts Philadelphia. In addition to being an award-winning poet, you're also an essayist, a scholar, and a professor of literature and creative writing. How do you do it all and wear so many hats?
Well, one important thing to put first is I am no longer a professor in the active sense. But I was one up until a year and a half ago. So, what can I say? Thank God for the summers.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for getting tenure and sometimes having a little bit of breathing room in my teaching days, in my load. And then there's just I'm kind of hard-headed when I get a notion to do something. And I'm so for example, when I was asked to consult with the filmmakers on Bad, Sonia Sanchez, I mean, that's like they've made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
Wow.
I mean, how was I not going to participate in that?
That's right.
You make room for that. You say no to something else. But I guess also and it's ironic, really. When I was teaching, I also had the benefit, I'll say, of a 50-mile commute. So I drove 25 miles in to my job and 25 miles back any day that I went in.
Wow.
And and now on the environmental side, that gives me a really bad carbon footprint, or gave me one. But it also allowed me a mental space to process, to think about things, to analyze whatever writing project I was working on, work out little kinks and things I was trying to work on. So, it was my headspace. I sometimes say it was my laboratory. So, you kind of, if you're me, you kind of work with what you've got when you've got it, And that's just how I've managed. The one other thing I think is important though is a friend of a very old and dear poetry friend of mine named J.C. Todd long ago put me on to the idea of artist centers and writing retreats. And so the first time I went to Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, I think it was 1992. And I think I could only manage to go for a week. This is long before I taught college. And I could only manage to go for a week, and my children were small. My grandmother yelled at me for leaving my children.
Uh-oh.
Mind you, they had a father in the house, but
right.
she didn't understand going away to pursue
it's
art.
Like, you are going to chase poetry.
Yeah, like what? But but to have a week where somebody was feeding me 3 squares and all I had to do was sit down in a chair and do what I wanted to do, I would make the most of that kind of opportunity. So
that's amazing. And would you suggest that all poets and writers do that, whether it's once a year or just as much as they can do it?
When you can work it out. I mean, when you can work it out, and especially my heart's really soft for people who are managing families in the midst of a writing career. I think it's crucial, when you're so much of your life is in obligation to other people. But yeah, everybody should try to have that at some point in time, because you may have only 2 weeks. Sometimes you're lucky enough to have a month, which I later did have at Yaddo. But you get this concentrated time with yourself that there's just nothing that beats that, and you can get a lot of mileage on whatever you're working on in a shorter time.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And I know there's always been the various. I remember there used to. I don't know if Marilyn Nelson still has the Soul Mountain.
No, she doesn't. But
okay.
I went there when she did. Oh my goodness, that was one of my most.
Yeah,
that was a delightful experience.
See, a big one.
Yeah, she closed it though.
Okay, and so tell me about also working with the Dodge Fest. Well, I don't want to say the Dodge Festival, but the
Dodge Foundation.
The foundation, right? And then also Mural Arts Philadelphia. What did those?
That was the Dodge was a long time ago now, and I really can't even remember how somebody referred me, but the Dodge, there's the gigantic festival, which everybody or hopefully knows about. But they also do both at the festival and during other times in the year, they do poetry workshops across the state of New Jersey generally in high schools. And so they use poets that are on their roster to be able to send out, can you go to Salem County High School? Can you go to Bridgeton, and do a week of poetry workshops or something?
Oh,
so,
I see.
So that's some of their other activities outside the festival. And I did that with them. I don't know how many years, maybe 8 years, here and there, and learned my way around New Jersey in the interim, and discovered that New Jersey really is more than the road to the beach. But
right.
But yeah, I did a number of Poets in the Schools gigs through the Dodge Foundation, and once also ran a workshop that maybe might have run like 4 Saturdays in a row. I drove out somewhere and met a lovely group of people every Saturday for a month. So it was those kinds of, facilitating poet jobs. But I also did some workshops at the Dodge Festival on the first day of the festival, which was always the day that was devoted to high school students. So that was another opportunity to, be with young people and share poetry and talk to them.
That sounds wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of your connection with mural arts, would that be kind of
mural arts? Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that.
Oh, that's okay.
So
No,
mural, a good friend of mine, and we have a little poetry mafia here in my neighborhood, and one of the people.
I love that poetry mafia.
One of the people in it is Yolanda Wisher, who was the second poet laureate of Philadelphia, and after Sonia Sanchez, and Yolanda used to work for Mural Arts, and she called on me to when Sonia Sanchez was responsible for a peace mural that's down in South Philly in Philadelphia, and they were putting together, Mural Arts was putting together a book of haiku, because Sonia's known for being a haiku master.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Mural Arts is putting together this haiku collection, and they wanted submissions, but they also wanted an introductory essay, and I wrote an essay to introduce the work in that collection.
Oh, wonderful. Mm-hmm. Well, I know one thing about being having visited Philadelphia is the beautiful murals all over the city. That really, give a nod to famous and notable Black folks from every area and industry and walk of life.
Yeah, they really are beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And so thank you for that, Nzadi. And so in thinking about a previous collection that you have, Brief Evidence of Heaven, it was a finalist for the Phyllis Wheatley Poetry Prize and sheds light on Anne Murray Douglas, Frederick Douglass's first wife. And I wondered about your inspiration for the collection in terms of why Anna Marie Douglas. Was there you felt a personal connection with her history?
I sure did. Why? There's several whys. I'll try to be concise with this. Mm-hmm. One was that Anna Murray Douglas was responsible in large part, for Frederick Douglass's escape. People, very few people know that. And among the many history books that were part of my research, only a handful of historians really acknowledge her role in his escape.
Wow.
So the question is, would we know who he is if she had not been instrumental in that way?
Wow.
Yeah, right. That's a big wow. So
I'm like,
then there's
are you kidding me?
No, because the juxtaposition in their lives was also very fascinating to me. He's, of course, one of our most literate voices from the 19th century. Mm-hmm. And one of the more famous freedom seekers. In contrast, Anna Mary Douglas was born free.
Yes, I see that on your website.
Free. Right.
Yeah.
But being, a free Black person in the early 19th century, more than likely you didn't have any money. You were scraping to get by. She was one of, I think I want to say 13 children. She came from a farm family. Her parents had been enslaved, but she was born free.
Right.
But on the other hand, so she didn't have the time to go to school. She was working as a domestic in Baltimore when she met Frederick Douglass.
I was about to ask you, how on earth did they even meet?
Right, because this is that period that's documented in his first narrative, where he's been, he was a troublesome person to the people who claimed to own him. And they lent him out to work on the docks. On the wharf in Baltimore.
Right, because that's when he was learning how to, I want to say, read and write.
Yeah, he was learning how to read then. And she was on the docks because she worked for a wealthy white family doing mostly laundry, and but she also had a side hustle, working for doing laundry for the ship captains.
Wow.
And so you can imagine that's where they crossed paths.
I guess he saw her and said, wow, this is a woman who works. This is a woman who It's about her
her own
business.
person,
She's
right?
got her own thing going on.
And she was a great saver. So, I felt like she had dreams for what she wanted to do with herself, and she saved money from this and that. She worked in service, and she lived with the people she worked for. So that's part of my motivation, to just raise up this woman who did not have the opportunity to go to school. And I felt that she wanted to become literate, but she was also kind of tough-minded, and wanted to sort of figure it out herself, find her own way to get to that point.
Sure.
And then she meets him, and they get married, and they have like 4 children in pretty rapid succession, about every 2 years. And so her opportunities for school are extremely limited.
Right.
And throughout the time that they're married and she's pregnant and having babies, she's still working. She's taking in laundry. She learns how to make shoes, and so forth. So she's extremely industrious in that way, but it is setting her further and further away from formal education. So I didn't. So what that meant for me, trying to learn about her, is that I had no direct access to her written voice. And so, so I wanted her role, her very active role, by the way, in the Underground Railroad, which if you go to certain sources and certain historical sites, they have nothing to say about her. And yet, really, the more I read in between the lines, I'm like, so let me get this straight. Frederick Douglass is running a newspaper, writing news stories, on the road, doing anti-slavery talks, and also he's feeding all these people in the basement every night? I don't think so. Eventually I came across some female historians who documented to some degree a very active role in the Underground Railroad. And so I just felt ultimately that this is a heavyset, dark-skinned woman who was looked down upon by anti-slavery elites, who people thought that she was not good enough to be married to Frederick Douglass, and who never quite fully learned how to read and write. And yet she's married to one of the most literate Black men in the country. So what kind of pressure does that place on her? And not only that, but her children are getting formal education.
Sure, because they have the means. It seems that they have
by
the
then
means.
they have the means. So she's the one getting left behind and getting overshadowed. And in the end, I just couldn't have that.
Oh my!
So
and we thank you for that, because this is a history. This is an aspect of history we really need to know about. And I know that I have not heard this. I knew that Frederick Douglass had been married, and he was married more than once. Is that correct?
That's correct. He was married to Anna and then that's the other thing. 44 years, 44 years and 5 children, and nobody can figure out anything to say about this woman. No, wait a minute. My feminist bones would not
allow that. Sure. That's amazing. Well, thank you for that.
It really is. It really is. There's very little. I mean, their oldest daughter wrote a booklet about her mother, and I relied on that really very much. It's on the Smithsonian website. But other than that, there's almost nothing direct. I mean, I scanned through his letters. I read all kinds of history books looking for, and I'd find maybe a paragraph, 2 paragraphs about her. So I invented things. I extrapolated.
Fascinating. Right. No, I understand. You got to read between the lines.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of research to do that, but yeah. Thank you for asking.
Oh, sure. I was really fascinated by it, really.
It's a pretty fascinating story. It really is.
And Nzadi, your work has been featured in several anthologies and journals. And also you have prose that is forthcoming in When We Exhale, Reflections on Rest, Grief, and Intimacy from Black Freighter Press, excuse me. And would you say that much of your writings, as you mentioned, you are someone who has attended writers' retreats and residencies and writing in the time that you were not teaching. Are you still on a similar writing schedule, would you say, or now, especially since, post-pandemic, how has your writing schedule changed in any way?
Well, I mean, it's changed in a wonderful way in that I'm not driving 50 miles a day anymore, and I'm not facing up to, I loved my students, but that was only part of my life. And so there are days, and I sort of map my life out at a week at a time. And so there are beautiful days when I can just be in my study all day. It's not every day, but I work at the desk, in the average week since the new book came out. It's been a little different, but in an average week, like maybe 3 times a week, maybe 5, I'm in a moment with something new that I can't really talk about, but that has consumed me to the point that I'm Googling things right before I go to bed. I was on the train to New York last Saturday, and I was scribbling in a notebook while the train was jostling me around. So when I get going on something, I work kind of obsessively like that.
I love that. I love that whole riding on the train. I used to do that. Was this the what is it? The SEPTA? What train?
Oh no, Amtrak. I was going to New York.
Oh, Amtrak going to New York. Okay, got you. Yeah, that whole riding on the train. I mean, there's just a real, spiritual feel about that.
No, right? I loved it.
Yeah.
But to answer to further, I also was lucky enough in mid-October to mid-November, I got a fellowship to a place called the Women's International Study Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh,
so I have a great love for Santa Fe, and I wanted to go back there, and I just applied. I actually, it's a COVID related thing. I applied before COVID. And then, everything fell apart in 2020 that people were trying to do.
Oh, sure.
I was supposed to go in July of 2020, and that wasn't happening.
Right.
So one thing and another, time passed. I figured, well, I guess they don't have the means to continue. And then we restarted the conversation, and I got a chance to go. And so I was there for a month in a beautiful little house in a beautiful room, just doing my thing.
Wow, it was like, it came about when it was supposed
when it was supposed
right?
To. Honestly, I really believe that. I really do. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so, I'm listening to you talk about Murray Douglas, and I'm really getting this sense of, for you, the importance of honoring the ancestors. And I felt that as I was reading your new work, Nzadi, Migration Letters. And, as it begins, you have the chapters here. Would you call them chapters? I want to make sure I don't.
Well, I think about them as sections.
Okay, sections. I love the beginning of the idea of ancestry and how the book put together with these beautiful letters, in poetics. So if you can please talk about your inspiration for your new work and how I would even say how it took shape in terms of what poems do you include and what are the themes going to be and all of that.
Sure. how it took shape, it's really taken shape over my whole life. But how the larger story, but how the book took shape was a couple of things happened. One distinct thing was that as you know, as you get older, you look up and realize that, you know, you're, as my cousin once put it, we're at the front of the line, y'all. In other words, like the people who are the old people in the family will eventually no longer be there. And so between 2015 and 2018, I lost my father, and I lost my mother, and then I lost my oldest auntie, my mother's oldest sister. And at, you know, there comes a point where you look at your history and you realize that these are the people that brought us up. These are the people who, for me, came to Philadelphia from Georgia in the 1940s. And my father came from South Carolina in 1930 and arrived in Philadelphia and grew up in Philadelphia. So you start to realize, because I have two adult sons, that whatever you want them to understand about how they become who they are, how I've become who I am, and my husband as well, who's also a child of migration. His people come from Alabama and Georgia up to Cleveland. But you look up and realize that this is a story that's not well told very often. And who's going to tell it? How are they going to know anything when the old people are gone? The migration generation, the Great Migration generation, is largely gone. They've largely transitioned at this point. And so what, you know, my mother's younger brother had died in 2010. And I realized that so I have one auntie left who's 94. She's clear-minded, but I looked up and realized that she's the last one standing in her family. She's the last one who rode that train and made that massive transition from rural, not just Georgia, rural Georgia, chicken chasing, egg collecting,
wow,
putting on your shoes when you got to the schoolroom door, that kind of Georgia. And so there was nobody to hold this information. And that was a big motivator, a big motivating factor. And also, you know, those were like family losses, but also in a particular way, when Aretha Franklin died, that hit me in a certain way, you know, because again, we take certain realities for granted, but life is changing all the time. And so there's a poem in the book that came out of the fact that I was listening to, you know, some of the reports on NPR and whatever about Aretha and her life. And, you know, here's the thing. There is something about the soul singers that came out of the South that you can't, there are other people whose music I love and respect and all that, but those people had a quality and a knowledge in their voices that I felt bereft, you know, like, because everybody I thought about, all of them were gone. And it didn't really occur to me until Aretha died. And it hit me very similarly when James Brown died.
I was thinking James Brown.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that put me in a place. And then Aretha, you start to feel like the pillars are coming down.
Wow.
And when I thought about it, like the only other person I could think of who really, you know, is in that category of soul singer is Gladys Knight.
Oh, Gladys Knight. Oh, yeah.
Who's from the South.
Oh, it's from the South.
Yeah, specifically people from the South. And I couldn't really, I thought, and I couldn't really come up with anybody else. Well, I just did. Mavis Staples is still with us. But I wish I had thought of her. But at any rate, that was part of the motivation for like turning to this gigantic pile of documents that I had been drafting and like sorting through them and realizing that a lot of them were shining a light on my place, time, and circumstance as a person who saw into the South through the experiences of my family, but was raised in the North.
Mm-hmm.
So that really we experienced a dual culture.
Sure.
And you know, and I've been conscious of this for a while, but it seems like maybe because of the civil rights movement was so overwhelming, or because so many changes happened really quickly for Black people in the late 20th century. But I feel like the Black migration from the South to the North, like people don't take that seriously as something monumental, but really it was.
Sure. And, you know, you're speaking to, in the very description of your book, Nzadi, to your time and circumstances growing up Black in Philadelphia on the periphery of the civil rights and Black power movements.
Mm-hmm.
But I also sense, as I'm reading your work, the Black arts movement.
Oh,
Because,
absolutely.
you know, the 1960s, as you have referenced, various works, and Lorraine Hainsbury and the characters in the original, and I'm saying the original because we know there's been so many different, you know, the films and right, Raisin in the Sun. I mean, Ruby Dee, Sidney Poitier, you know, the classic.
Well, which in my mind is the only one.
The only, okay, right. But
I mean, I know that's a bias, but I fully own it. I own it. I'm sorry, I don't care.
No, truly. But I almost have to, you know, for me as a former K-12 teacher who taught it, and anytime I've had the opportunity, and knowing that my students, you know, we were teaching when, you know, when the movie came about with Sanaa Lathan and the hip hop artists and things, and some of the kids thought that was the original Raisin in the Sun.
And
we're like, oh no, sirs and ma'ams, we have to show you what the original. We need to go back some.
So yeah, absolutely.
So you
get I had the same experience in college classrooms. Where somebody had the nerve to mention that one, and I was like, no.
It didn't start with.
That's not what we're talking about.
And I had that with the kids who saw Fences with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis. They thought, they were like, oh yeah, August Wilson, the one who made the film with Denzel Washington. And I'm like, no, that was the new stuff. But no, this Fences goes back. I mean, you know, so I appreciate what you're saying is we have to always remind the newer generations, and especially in the field of education, because when these new editions and whatnot come out from the publishers, because they're always, you know, thinking of how to make money in the film,
Hollywood, how to renovate the story,
right, and the film Hollywood industry. We've got to keep reminding, you know, our youth that, hey, a real foundation. And not only that, we need to look into the authors and the writers of these works and understand their backgrounds and where they came from.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So I feel like I lost the thread of your question related to this.
Oh, we were talking about, because I heard you say that it was a parallel, almost like a parallel understanding or existence. While you were in the North, you were also understanding, what it sounded like to me, that your life was being impacted by what was going on in the South and the civil rights movement. And and I even jumped in and was like, hey, well, I see the thread of that in your collection, but I also see the Black arts movement as well.
Oh, that's right. That's just what I want to speak to. I mean, I you know, I'm seasoned, but I'm really grateful for that, because the things that I've seen come about, you know, like that 1962 film of Raisin in the Sun. But I also was coming in through my teen years when the Black arts movement shifted us yet again, and gave us different language and different ways to look in the mirror, and and challenge some of the negativity that seemed to come with young Black people out in the street, where people would call you, you'd be playing and something would happen, and a real or a fake skirmish, and the next thing you know, somebody's throwing epithets like Black African booty scratcher or something. And I mean, that people used to say that. That was on the street, that was street talk for, to try to make people feel bad. And there were some girls in our neighborhood that their mother didn't always have the money to send them to the hairdresser and get their hair pressed, and sometimes she would cornrow their hair, and the minute they came out, epithets were going at them about, oh, you look so country and all of that. This is before cornrows were, what they are now.
The thing, right?
And so, but meanwhile, the others of us are enduring the torture of press and curl every 3 weeks. So, and thinking we were like something special because of that. So the Black arts movement was really important to me in giving me a sense of there in my mind, there had to be some place to stand where I wasn't expected to look down at myself, and I wasn't expected to think I was inferior and people like me were inferior to white people, because that had never made any sense to me. I just didn't buy it. What I saw on TV, what I saw unfolding in the South with Selma and the Pettus Bridge, and people who look like my Sunday school teacher getting beat over the head because they wanted to vote.
Right.
That made no sense to me. So I'm like, how does that make us the inferior people? So I was just looking for some place where I could be unapologetically Black, because I already was on the inside, but I wasn't seeing that in the culture very much. And so when the Black arts movement came along, I was down with it, ready for it.
Wow.
And by being exposed to people like Amiri Baraka and Sonia Sanchez, Gil Scott Heron, Nikki Giovanni, Gwendolyn Brooks, etc., that became like I had armor, I had a world, I had a place to be in, and all these things to read, So
right.
So yes, it was a civil rights movement. And by the way, this is the other thing about the civil rights movement. People always, just immediately zoom in on the South. But as you probably saw in the book, I mean, that had impact on people like me who were in the North. Like, we had to go to school with people that were feeling kind of hostile. It wasn't, nobody was spitting on us.
So it wasn't just in the South. I'm glad you're saying that.
I mean, my brother, my older brother, some of the older kids in the neighborhood, that we moved to our neighborhood at a point where it was largely white, and the school was largely white. Now, these people knew how to behave, but that didn't mean they were happy to see us. And so that, that some of the teachers didn't get the memo, and they were hostile.
Yeah.
So, there were ways in which what was happening in the South radiated through the whole country. And just being in the North wasn't enough to insulate you from that. Not me, anyway.
Right.
So yeah, all of that was made a huge impact on me.
And, you're essentially, Nzadi, thank you for that, answering a question I would ask you, such as, how did you become a poet? But you just answered that.
Did I kind of answer that?
Oh, you answered that, because you discuss, okay, here's civil rights and here's the Black arts movement. And while you and your family were already in the North, here's how you were impacted by what was actually with the civil rights movement, but also here come all the heavies. Here come all the founders of the Black arts movement. And so you are essentially being, you know, embraced by that in intellectual thought and having these models of creativity.
Right. At an early age.
At an early age. So like, you know, this is your, you know, you absorbed all of that. I can hear that.
Absolutely. I tell you, I can still see it in my head. I was in my mother's bedroom on an August afternoon. I was too old to play double dutch in the street anymore, but I was too young to work. And the TV was freed up. Nobody was watching the TV. And I found the public television was, had bad signals back then, but I managed to get a fuzzy view of this TV show called Like It Is.
Wait a minute. Gil Noble? I want to say.
Is that Gil Noble or was it the other one?
I know who you're talking about. Tony, not Tony Brown's Journal. I'll never remember.
Maybe. It was one of them. I know it was coming from New York. And all I knew was there was this array of black people delivering poetry. And I was like, whoa, I loved what they were saying. Right. And that was the first time I saw Sonia.
Oh, you said doing poetry. Okay. I don't know how I know that. Only because maybe through reading or hearing. Right. But yes, I think
it was the show that was hosted by Ellis Hazlitt. Soul. It was called Soul.
Okay.
And so I watched the whole thing in utter fascination and joy. And and then we were lucky enough, like by being in a major city, a black city, you know, half a black city, there was a black bookstore not far from our house.
What was the name of it?
It was called Uhuru Kitabu, which meant
freedom something.
Freedom Books.
Freedom Books. Okay.
And they were selling Broadside Press books.
Oh yeah.
And Third World Press books. If Third World Press had barely been initiated at that point.
And now it's over. And now it's 50.
Now it's over 50 years old.
That's right.
I know.
Shout out to Dr. Haki Armada Booty and co.
Absolutely. But yeah, I have a first edition of his book, Don't Cry, Scream, that I bought when I was a teenager.
Wow, that's major. That's major.
Yeah, so you know, so they set me off, as the saying goes.
Exactly, and set off it was. That's right. And so, well, then let me ask you, Nzadi. So is Brief Evidence of Heaven? That was not your first collection.
No, actually, my first collection goes way back into the barrels of time.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, it was a little book called Birthmarks. It was actually sort of a prototype in a sense, not prototype really, but it laid the groundwork for what happens with migration letters.
Okay.
I've been thinking about this stuff, as I said, for a long time. I was fascinated by the fact that, like, I grew up in a little enclave of black families within an integrated neighborhood. And many of us had people who were from down south. But our relatives, we never saw our relatives. We never went back down south. But some of the kids went back in the summers. And, you know, and they would come back and they'd be all dark and fat and happy and talking about what it was like to be down
south and see all their cousins.
Right. And we didn't have it like that.
Okay.
We didn't even know really our southern relatives.
Okay.
And I started to wonder, like, well, you know, where did we come from? How did we get here? So when I did my master's work in the 80s, I took it as an opportunity to interview older people who had come from the South. And one of them was my grandmother. And so long story short, my first book, which was called Birthmarks, was a product that I created for my master's degree in creative writing, where I made poems out of the interviews.
Oh, wow.
Because I learned so much, and I developed wonderful relationships with the people I interviewed. And then I crafted poems out of that. So that was actually my first book.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that history. That's amazing. And so, Nzadi, that really brings us to, we're celebrating National Poetry Month, so it's so appropriate to have you on discussing your new work, Migration Letters. And this volume is published by Beacon Press. And one thing I want to note, I just love that you pay homage to Gwendolyn Brooks. You pay homage to Lorraine Hansberry. You have the Hansberry Suite. You are really discussing and sharing your life, as you mentioned, in Philadelphia. And there's so much here in this collection that students and poetry lovers, librarians, and all of us can learn from. And so will you please share some of your work with us? And we'd be delighted to hear you read.
Sure, thank you. So I'm going to read a poem first that...
And let me know the page numbers too, so I can read along with you.
Oh dear.
I mean, if you can, I don't want to.
Yeah,
you might have a different version.
Yeah, I do actually. I'm sorry.
I just realized that. I said, "Oh boy."
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have thought that through.
It's okay, no problem.
But I'm sure you noticed this. We might not have time to talk about it at any length, but so I found out very quickly when I was doing Brief Evidence of Heaven, and I found out that about how attached to numbers Anna Mary Douglas was. In the course of all that reading about illiterate people and numbers and things like that, I found out that I sort of have this attachment to numbers. Like numbers are kind of magical to me and resonant to me, almost like names. And so you'll notice that all of the poems in the book have a number title.
Yes.
And they have a text title
at the bottom.
And so what I'm going to do is read the number title because people can't see what I'm doing. So I'm going to read the number title and then read the text title.
Okay.
And then I'll do the poem. Poem 173, Migration Letter. Squeezing fresh oranges for juice and setting the weighted glass pitcher to chill far back in the fridge was worth the work. In the 30s, you stood in uniform, spun a metal wheel to start the cloudy gush that cranked to bee yellow pulp for those extra children. You gave a folded smile, whose parents paid you in torn blouses, envelopes of pennies and dimes. Dumb beautiful, we came bobbing to life in the 50s, called down your rough carpeted green stairs to a world rung right. That single love bright morning note you poured in small, delicate glasses.
Thank you for that. And that was about Anna Murray Douglas.
No, actually.
No?
No, that was about my grandmother. But you know what's amazing about what you just observed? Much later, after Brief Evidence was published and I was doing talks and readings and stuff, somebody asked me at Adelphi University, where did you get this intimacy with a person who lived over 100 years ago?
Right.
I realized it because my grandmother was a domestic. And and a lot of the behavior and attitudes and tones and way of looking at the world and way of handling herself, that's where some of it came from.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so but that actual poem that I just read was inspired by my grandmother.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So this is another one. Poem number 7 is actually a series of 3. So it's poem number 7, and the series title is Our Day Will Come. And I'm going to read the second poem, which is called Christening. We landed, new North Stars, in unrelenting hours of a continuous flickering night. Whether we spiraled quick or lolled, ambled or fretted, between snaps from the brownie camera, damp clothes, and Nat Cole lyrics, rug remnants matched, nailed over old linoleum. You paused a snatch to take in our meanings, an inventory over time. Who cracked plates? Who sang windows open? Who jostled devilment, climbed banisters, turned blue, rebelled? No matter. If the lottery of birth showed holes, you could make jokes, borrow supposes, or beg grace. After each christening, stricken, fearless, you drew back the coverlet on a pair of velvet cheeks, poured lashes, rose-brown lips. Blind will milking baby linen. You counted out 2 breaths, a few more, thinking ahead, a week or 2 at a time. You counted everything. Shoestrings, potatoes. You counted everything you could already see coming, everything you could see missing. That one was a tribute to my parents when they were young, struggling young people, idealistic parents to 4 children.
What did they think of you becoming a poet?
This is something that comes up at other points in the book. This was a generation, they didn't say a lot about a lot. They made a lot of assumptions that, as my mother would have said, common sense ought to tell you that,
wow.
You're going to need a day job.
Right.
So, they felt like if they raised you with certain fundamentals, that you have enough sense to figure some things out. Like, if you could, make a poet thing work, fine. But like, they couldn't understand how that would happen.
Right. On its own, just solely that. Right.
Right.
That's why
But they were happy that, to see that I was interested in writing, because that was something that sort of reflected well on them and their effort to raise us. And it meant you were educated. It meant you were thoughtful.
Right.
So, they saw the positives. But, they were also like, okay, so what you going to do for some money, honey?
Right.
So, yeah.
Can we get one more?
Sure. I'm trying to decide. Okay. I'm skipping way ahead. So there's a number of sections of sort of rather series poems in this book. I didn't expect that, but it happened. So a really fundamental series to the whole collection is a 5-part poem called Great Migration Pentimento. And pentimento just means something that has 5 pieces to it.
Okay.
So I'm going to read 1, 2, 3, the 4th one. the common thread throughout is that I was struck by, this goes back to that thing about how the civil rights movement sped up a lot of things for Black folks. So I was struck by the fact that, like, I had parents who had grown up, they didn't wear their shoes most of the time. And they, they had chickens and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
They grew up in the country. And here I was going to college, going away to college at that. And
right.
like, just what does that mean? Just the transition in our lives that quickly. That was what kicked off this series. So I'm going to read one of the poems from Great Migration Pentimento, which is poem number 109.
Okay.
And it's called Stetson East. Now, there is a word in here that some people listening might not know. I mentioned the word whist, which is a reference to the card game Bid Whist.
Oh, Bid Whist. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, yes. Whist.
Yeah. And I also mentioned the Ohio Players. And for those who don't know, well, Google it. I mean, if you want to really have a good laugh, go on YouTube and look at the Ohio Players.
And watch the Ohio Players. Okay.
But yeah, so this is a phase where I am going to college. Stetson East. When you entered Stetson Hall at college, you pushed back a blue open door. You knew the words to lots of songs, but never heard of whist. Carried a cassette player and a Corvette's radio like gifts for the Christ child. Dragged in 2 pleather suitcases, sky blue, plants in liquor store boxes. Eked out a dumb, anxious smile to a girl with the same key and letter tucked in her jeans. A Jersey girl with a doctor father and a stereo, turntable, receiver and speakers, tape and radio. Hung up a cloth coat, aqua, beside the rabbit collar leather on the door. Polyester coverlet sneaked a gaze at Glen Plaid. Terry cloth robe scrutinized velour. You two would skid from dare to skank to rescue, issuing weekly vows of never again. Turn 344 into beauty hall confessional, study parlor, box of hilarity. Enter parties sideways like Ohio Players singing fire. Set more than one, stomp out a few with howls the moon found amusing. But you didn't know that yet. That's it.
I love that. I'm giving you snaps, Nzadi. Because I'm like, wow, I could just see you with your knee-high socks and your cute little skirt and your little sweater, with your hair, you know what I mean? And your hair curled just so with the nice press. And you're going to, you know what I mean? Like, was that the outfit? What was the look?
No, not really.
No? Okay, I'm trying.
No, I mean, reasonable guess. No, okay. I was bending, my arc was bending in a really different direction.
I see. Okay, by that time. Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. I had like appliques all over my jeans and vintage sweaters. And
this was the platform shoes. Is that the era? Okay.
Yep.
And by now, Black folks were wearing afros by this time. Is that it?
Definitely.
Okay, got you.
Definitely. Okay. Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah, I got my ears pierced 2 more times, and
whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good stuff though.
It sounds like a fun time. I mean, as fun would go. I know there was still a lot of racial upheaval going on and things of that nature. But as far as the unity among Black folks and just the whole getting together to come up with, solutions and being together, as you mentioned, during those times of all that good music.
Yeah. It was interesting. And I chose to go to college in Boston, of all places.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In the midst of that whole desegregation
And
thing.
could you still have a good old, Black time? I mean, with
yeah,
Black
because I
students?
was a new college student. We didn't venture off campus that often.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That whole virulent situation was happening in South Boston. And we made our business never to go in that area.
To go there. Okay.
So
I see.
But the city in general, I mean, I'm sorry if anybody gets their feelings hurt, but the city was horrible. It was hostile in a way that I thought I had some experience with a hostile city.
With hostility.
Having grown up in Philadelphia under Frank Rizzo, but I was wrong.
Whoa.
Yeah. But
whole nother level, huh?
Boston was a whole nother level, and then 3 times as cold. So
Yeah, right.
It was
wow.
It was an adventure, though. It was an adventure. Had to happen.
Do you think? And thank you for that. Let me please thank you for sharing your heart and your work. From Migration Letters, Poems by Nzadi Keita. And I'll talk more about this when in the final, when I do the full podcast by the end, mentioning it again. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, your history is so rich, Nzadi, and you have so much to share about your experiences, not only in education, but as you mentioned, civil rights and Black arts movement. Do you think you'll ever write a memoir?
I doubt it. And what's funny is I taught memoir writing.
Oh, wow.
I feel
so why do you say no
right now? But no, I taught memoir writing, but well, you do want your family to be speaking to you, in the end. And I don't know. Right. I'm not really prepared for that. I'm not really prepared for that level of unveiling. I was really sort of devastated and scared. Okay, I'll just put it like that. To see that so much of my personal story was creeping into these poems.
True.
Because I was so safely ensconced in it with Brief Evidence of Heaven. This was not my story. I was just working.
Right. You're like, this is her story, and you're happy to tell her story. I'm just trying to
sort of find legitimate ways to talk about her life. But now I'm feeling like overexposed here. But I did appreciate, like that historically speaking, that I was positioned to talk about some things.
You truly are. I mean, I'm listening to you here as a podcaster, and I'm going, wow, this would be a fascinating memoir. I mean, well, especially.
Yeah, no doubt it would, but I don't see myself doing that.
Okay. Got you.
I mean, it's a worthy question, but no, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. At least, we won't be bugging you for it after this. I mean, we got an answer. So
yes.
And so Nzadi, what are you looking forward to doing in terms of, you have any readings going on, any talks, lectures, things that we can look out for?
Well, I have two live readings in Philly next month. One is on May 1st and one is on May 16th. And those I'm really excited for. There's a number of things in the works. There's a number of proposals that I have out that are pending that would probably manifest in the fall. But and I'm still like in the process of booking readings and events and things like that. So I just heard about a possibility of going to Atlanta probably in the fall to do a reading. So I'm kind of just excited to meet people and talk about the work and get reactions to the work, and continue to like, this is an interesting period of discovery because I've been immersed in this book from a very personal angle, and now it's out in the world.
It's out here.
It's kind of stunning, to realize that, like, whoa, people are reading those things.
Yes.
But it's also always a fun for me to see what other people react to, So I'm looking forward to just dialoguing with people about what the book entails.
Cool. And where can we pick up the book in terms of, book ordering, bookstores, things of that nature?
Sure. Well, it can be ordered from Beacon, from the press, as well as, your standard online book sellers, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Powell's, bookshop.org, all are selling the book. And, so people, depending on where they are, they might want to order it through their local independent bookstore, hopefully. I'm a big fan of independent bookstores. So, but yeah, it's readily available online. And it's also got an ebook version. So some people, some people might like that.
Oh, totally. Totally, with the ebooks. And Nzadi, well, thank you for that. Please tell us how we can follow you on the socials, where we can get your updates and know what you're doing next.
I'm a very steady Instagrammer. So my Instagram handle is at Nzadi Keita. That's NZ as in zebra, A, D as in David, I, KEI, T as in Thomas, A. And that's primarily where I post on a regular basis.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Nzadi, thank you so much. It has been a sheer pleasure to talk with you during National Poetry Month. Congratulations again on your migration letters. And thank you so much for joining me on Nerdacity Podcast. It's been a great time to talk with you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
And you were just listening to episode 53, featuring Nzadi Keita discussing her latest book of poetry, Migration Letters. Follow Nerdacity Podcast on Instagram at Nerdacity Podcast, and also tweet and follow us on X at NerdacityPod1. You can follow DuEwa Frazier on all social media platforms, and I hope you will listen to previous episodes of Nerdacity on Spotify Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Podcast Addict, and of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel DuEwa World. Thanks for listening. Take care.